Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 2, Episode 17 for Sunday, April the 19th, 2015. My name is Graham Perro. With me today are Tyler Fitch and Melissa Daphne. We have our Q&A app running on our Google Plus page. If you're watching live, feel free to drop us a line and ask some questions if you like. We're also on Twitter at Lax Podcast if you want to get in touch with us that way. And we'll get to your comments during the show. A few news items to talk about before we get to this week's games. First one was a bit of an interesting one. The Edmonton Oilers have been using the term the Battle of Alberta for many years to talk about their games in the NHL, obviously, with Calgary, the Calgary Flames. But the Edmonton Rush have also been using that term for their games with the Roughnecks, and for that matter, the Edmonton Eskimos and the Calgary Stampeders have been using that term for years as well. But apparently the Oilers trademarked the term, or the phrase, Battle of Alberta back in 2002. And when the Eskimos want to use it, they actually have to ask permission from the Oilers. But the Rush haven't been doing that. And so the Oilers have actually asked the Rush to stop using the term Battle of Alberta because it's their copyright, or their trademark, I believe it is. Yeah, so the Rush basically made a statement saying, well, that's kind of disappointing. We're not using it to try and rip you off or anything like that. I mean, I think they said something to the effect of that they're not looked at as sort of peers in the sporting community of Edmonton, and so they were kind of disappointed. Now, the Oilers did say, look, it's not a big deal, but we do own the trademark, so if you ask us if you can use it, in all likelihood, we'll just say yes. But this, I'm not sure how I feel about this. It kind of sounds like what I would do with my kids when they were really little. Yes, you can have a drink of juice, but you have to say please. As long as you say please, you can have the juice, but you have to actually say the word. And that's fine when you're dealing with a 5-year-old. But when my sister comes over for dinner, I don't make her say please, and I don't refuse her service if she doesn't say please. And it doesn't sound like the kind of thing that is really necessary. I can't imagine how the Edmonton Oilers are losing money, or people are getting confused with the Rush and the Oilers because of that phrase. That seems kind of silly. Melissa, do you know anything about this?
This is news to me, but I do have some experience with trademarks and trademark law. Not that I'm a lawyer. But the funny thing about trademarks is you actually have to enforce them, and the longer you go without enforcing them, the less likely you are to actually keep your trademark. And so the fact that the Rush have been using this phrase for how many years now, and they're just now kind of getting around to saying, hey, we don't want you to infringe on our trademark, they're actually kind of killing their own case. I mean, there's a reason that trademark lawyers have to go for extra schooling because it's complicated. But the fact is, you have to enforce your trademark, and it's more than just saying, hey, cease and desist. You have to prove that it's impacting your business and that it's causing confusion and that you are actively enforcing it, which they are not. So this could be an interesting one to watch, whether the Rush actually want to push back or if they're going to ask for permission like a little kid or what. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I am married to a lawyer, so that's my experience with trademarks, is talking about them as preparing for the bar exam and whatnot. And you nailed all the points. You have to enforce it. You have to, if you don't enforce it, you lose it. On the opposite side of enforcing it is the creation of it, in my mind. And I was following through the Twitter discussion that Jason Greger posted when he heard about this, and I guess the Eskimos and Rough Riders, those are CFL teams, they were using it before the Oilers did it, but the trademark is not like a patent, where a patent could be invalidated if it was something that's already existed, but a trademark is not. You basically trademark something that comes about even after it was created, and that's okay. You can get those trademarks. So it's not like the Rush can now say, well, the Eskimos were using it, so we wanted to use it too. It doesn't matter. They're stuck. It's ridiculous. that they're in the same building and they're just getting treated like this. It's awful. I think they'll be allowed to use it. If not, what are you going to do? Sue the Rush for negative dollars? I mean, they don't have money. They have no assets. They could. Here's what Urban could do. Of course, he would then get no money out of it. Just keep using it, and then the Oilers can sue them, and they could just win the Rush. It's like, here, take the Rush, please.
As long as Bruce Urban can take a few players with him when he goes to Saskatchewan. I think that was one of the things he wanted to do before. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yep.
On a similar note, I guess we'll get to Edmonton again in a second. I was asked on my Facebook page today a few questions about NLL expansion. So I want to ask you guys what you thought about these ideas, or if you had heard of any such rumors. The first two were Nashville and Montreal, and I have not heard anything about Nashville. Montreal, I've heard rumors that it would be a good idea, or that the league is interested. Of course, the big stumbling block there is you need an owner with a couple of $1 million in Montreal, and the willingness to put in money into something that he will probably lose on. But people like Kurt Stiers and Jamie Dowick and Bruce Urban are all doing it. They've all got bucket loads of money. They know they're not in this to make money. They're just in it because they love lacrosse and will hopefully not lose too much. So they need somebody like that in Montreal. They have had a couple of preseason games there in the past couple of years, and I meant to check the attendance stats on those, but I didn't. But I have a feeling they did reasonably well attendance-wise. Yeah, so like I said, I haven't heard anything about Nashville. I know nothing about it as a sports town, other than the Predators are there, but I don't know what kind of numbers they're pulling in. And the other one was the Philly Wings returning to Philadelphia. Now, from what I've heard, the Wings franchise is gone to New England, and that's where they are. They were told you can't use the name Wings, you have to change your name to something else, because the league, I believe, retains the name Wings. But I have heard rumors that possibly as soon as next year there will be a new team in Philadelphia called the Wings, but it won't be the Black Wolves moving back. It'll be an expansion team. So that seems a little on the weird side. I have a feeling something similar happened with the Columbus Land Sharks way back in the day. This must have been 10, 12 years ago now. I don't remember the details, but it had something to do with them moving to Montreal, but then the team stayed in Columbus. There was some weird thing happening with the Land Sharks and the Montreal Express. Anyway, I wanted to get your opinions on that. There was another one about the Oilers buying the Rush, but we'll get to that in a second. Tyler, do you know anything about these rumors?
I haven't heard anything, but I'm kind of ready to give up on the U.S. They've not many places left to try that they haven't already. I guess Nashville could be interesting, but I think Canada is the place they should definitely go. Maybe Saskatchewan and call them being in the West, even I think they're right in the middle, but they already have enough teams out east, and there's nowhere I can think of in the West unless they did a second Vancouver team. Occasionally you'll hear people say Victoria, but you just gotta laugh. It's like, that's not easy to get to. They don't have a large arena. I guess the one that the Shamrocks play in is not the largest arena around Victoria. That's the one I'm used to. But it'll be about the same as Langley. I don't know. I think the league needs to grow. There's enough players out there that they could do all right. They used to have like twice as many teams, almost 16 at the top of its day, and those are all the kids that are growing up now and not finding a place to play. Expansion would be great for the league if they can find the right place. What do you think, Melissa?
Well, as far as rumors go, I think we hear similar rumors pretty much every season, but I agree. It would be nice to see some smart expansion, but the problem is too many ownership groups that they can find, they're not willing to lose money for even a couple of years and really give a team the chance to find its footing. I mean, it seemed like the Shamrocks were doing relatively well, but they didn't last in Chicago, and obviously the Blazers are gone, and we've seen some relatively strong teams that just haven't stuck around, and a lot of that's the ownership group, not even the fans. I mean, if you can get 5,000 or 6,000, that's something to build on. And as we've seen in Denver, there's more lacrosse camps, there's more lacrosse leagues at a younger age than there have ever been, and it just keeps growing and growing. And so Denver is probably going to be a strong market for a long time because you have that kind of grassroots where you got the kids seeing a Mammoth game, they fall in love with the sport, they start playing, and siblings go through and friends go through. I mean, my best friend's son is wanting to play lacrosse now, and his friend plays lacrosse, and so that was after seeing a Mammoth game, and he's hooked. He's a hockey kid. His dad played hockey, competed, but he's definitely wanting into lacrosse now too. So I think if you can find some of those beds that have really strong hockey presences and somehow kind of get them involved, we might actually be able to see some expansion. But they've definitely gone about it the wrong way, I think, in many ways. You know, this is definitely a league. If you oversell it and the team underperforms, they just cut and run as quick as possible. But if they know that you're getting into this and it's going to take a lot of work, but down the road, 10, 15 years, you might be looking at another NHL, maybe not quite, but then it's a different story. But you have to put in the work, and I think too many of the ownership groups really haven't been willing to build this from the ground up. They're looking at it as some easy money, like, oh, I can fill the seats easy, this is a fun game, people love it. But it's more than just that. I mean, it's the experience, but it's also growing it. I mean, there's so many camps and stuff that the players do. Like, they're going out and they're growing the sport, and you just don't see that in too many cities. So I would like to see some expansion, but when we have this, it expands and retracts, it's just not good for the league. It's harder to sell for the next group when you're looking. It's like, oh yeah, we had 12 teams this year, 8 teams this year, 15 the next year. They don't want to see those kind of things. I mean, that's part of what the Arena Football League had. In business school, I remember we actually did a case study on that, and you just saw these huge contractions, and then it would expand again, and it would contract, and it was like there was so much. It's kind of no wonder that they were really struggling to find new ownership groups because it was way too volatile. If I'm an investor, I'm not going to want to invest in something that's that volatile. So it'd be nice, but if they do it, I hope they do it smart, not like they have in the past. I think, while Jim Jennings did a great job of selling the league, I think way too much too fast, and we're just kind of still seeing some of the fallout.
I think part of the problem, it seems kind of backwards, but I think part of the problem was the success in Denver. When they moved the Washington Power to Denver, the team took off, and not only was successful right away, but was successful at the gate right away. They were bringing in all kinds of fans. They were filling the stadium every night, and very quickly turned into like one of the top grossing teams. And I wonder if Jennings looked at that and used that to say, hey, people in Chicago, hey, people in Arizona, hey, people in Boston, people everywhere, look at what these guys did. They went from no team at all, suddenly they have a team, they're bringing in 18,000 fans a game, they must be making money hands over fist, this could happen to you. And they sold that to a whole bunch of people. And sort of, as it turned out, I mean, all of that stuff was true. It did happen that way in Denver, and it was great. But that was the exception, not the rule. And I think he sold that as, this is what's going to happen when it comes to your town as well. And obviously it didn't. I don't know if they just said, okay, we'll just open the doors and wait for the money to roll in, and so they didn't put in as much work as they needed to. Or maybe the ownership group in Denver did a lot more work than the other teams did. I don't know exactly what it was. But it worked in Denver. It didn't work in a whole bunch of other places. Things like Edmonton didn't take off right away, but they're doing okay now. Calgary took off pretty well. And I think they kind of peaked and came down a little bit, but they're still up in the 11,000 per game range, so that's pretty good. But yeah, Jennings did expand really quickly, and in as many places as he could, really, and that kind of backfired. Now that we've got more of a stable core, they're not expanding all the time. I don't think it would be a bad time to expand. Like you said, Tyler, there's all kinds of players out there. It's not like adding another team is going to water down the talent in the league. Um, there are certainly enough players out there who are good enough to play in the league and just don't have a place to play. So I mean, it's that kind of thing's really good for leagues like CLAX. But I think the league could probably handle an extra team, or even a couple, as long as they can get decent ownership who are committed, and that's probably the harder part. What else was there? The rumor about the Oilers buying the Rush. I heard about this last week as well. I think the rumor is actually a couple of years old, but the story of it just came out fairly recently in an interview with Bruce Urban. He said that he was in talks with the Oilers to buy the team. And I don't remember if there were money issues, but I think part of it was, and this is what we were talking about earlier, he wanted to take the top 5 players or something on the team with him and create an expansion team in Saskatchewan. And the Oilers said, "What? I don't think so." And you can't blame them. I mean, that seems a little odd. But yeah, I think that was part of it. The two teams don't get on so well these days. So I imagine any rumors of the Oilers buying the Rush are referring to this, which are a couple of years old. I did ask Mike Wilson, who's the Rush beat writer for NHL.com, on Saturday if they had announced the NHL draft results during the Rush game, and he just said no, the Rush and the Oilers aren't the best of friends these days. So yeah, I guess they basically play in the same arena. I believe the Oilers own the arena as well, so they must deal with each other financially. But yeah, I don't think those purchase rumors are recent at all. Have you guys heard any different?
Nothing from my circles.
Yeah, it might just be some wishful thinking, because we have seen ownership groups that have hockey teams seem to do well with the lacrosse teams, but it does not sound like it's a good fit.
No, and Urban is too committed of an owner, I think, too invested in his team, not just financially, but he's a big lacrosse fan, so he's interested in the team doing well, not just from a financial point of view. So it doesn't sound like the kind of situation where he'd want to sell. Moving on to the playoff picture in the NLL. A couple of changes from the games this past weekend. Edmonton has now clinched first place in the West. Colorado has clinched second. Actually, have they clinched second? They've clinched the playoffs. I'm pretty sure they're ahead enough of both the Roughnecks and the Stealth, so they've likely clinched second.
Yeah, they're definitely second. This game was going to decide who was first and who was second, whether they were still in the race. They've had second. Like, it's been decided that we had a home game for a week or two.
That's right. We did talk about that last week. I remember now. So we have Edmonton first in the West, we have Colorado second, and we have either Vancouver or Calgary third. In the East, we have Toronto and Rochester in first and second, and I believe Rochester clinched at least second place this past weekend. But we still don't know whether it'll be Toronto or Rochester first in the division. Though I believe the Rock's magic number for clinching that and also clinching first overall is 1. So if they win or Rochester loses at all, then Toronto clinches first overall. So Rochester would be second, and either Buffalo or New England will be third in the East. I took a quick look before the show, and the only way that happens is if New England wins all 3 of their remaining games, 2 of which are against Buffalo, and Buffalo also loses its other remaining game against Vancouver. So all of that has to happen in order for New England to get that last playoff spot. So it's more than likely going to be Toronto, Rochester, Buffalo in the East. Games of the week. There were 5 of them. Game number 1 we'll talk about is Toronto, New England. I was at this game. It was an entertaining game for sure. I did tweet at one point during the first half that Toronto was winning this game, but they're being outplayed. Um, they just didn't seem this doesn't seem to be all together on the same page. Um, it almost looked like they had a change to their offense that they weren't quite used to, which didn't make any sense because it was Kevin Crowley's third game as a Rock, not his first, and they dealt with his addition much better in the previous couple of games. Rob Hellier wasn't back. Colin Doyle wasn't back, though he was added to the active roster. And it wasn't till like an hour before game time that it was announced that he was not going to be playing in that game. Maybe that was it. Maybe they thought, okay, we have to change everything up because Colin's back and we don't know what's going to happen. And then they're suddenly told before the game that he's not back. I don't see why that would really significantly change the way they. I mean, if he's back, that's going to significantly change the way they play. But the fact that he wasn't it makes me wonder that wasn't it. But in any case, Brandon Miller played pretty well in the first half. Wasn't great, but he kept the team in it, and I thought he did okay. Evan Kirk was pretty good in the New England net, and I thought New England played much better defensively than the Rock did. There were a lot of times when the Rock would just get to the end of their 30 seconds and just dump the ball in the corner or just drop it because they didn't even have a desperation shot. It wasn't like, okay, we have 2 seconds left on the shot clock. We can't set up a play. Just fire it at the net. Well, we can't see the net, so we'll just drop it. So New England defense played pretty well in the first half. Special teams were the story of this game, though, for the Rock, for sure. They had 6 power play goals and 4 shorthanded goals. Only 5 goals of their 15 were 5-on-5. It almost got to the point where, you would start seeing. I was expecting to start seeing jokes on Twitter about New England declining penalties, but yeah, it was odd because the Rock were almost playing better with 4 players on the floor than with 5. A couple of weird things happened. I wrote about all these on my blog, which I will pimp now, nllchatter.com. So you can head over there for all the details. I won't talk about them all here because we'll be here for an hour. But the one thing I wanted to mention was Jesse Gamble and Mike Manley got into a fight. And I don't remember how it started. I just remember the two of them trying to take each other's helmets off for like 30 seconds, and they couldn't. And they basically both stopped, stood back, took their helmets off, and went back in again. Because trying to take each other's helmets off just was not working. Anyway, they started the fight. They did their little thing, and refs broke it up. Manley just headed off to the box. And Gamble walked around sort of holding his hand up like this and showing it to the ref. And it seemed kind of odd because he was showing it to the ref, and then he went to the other ref, and then he went by the Rock bench and then off the floor. So we assumed, okay, well, maybe he got the instigator, and with the instigator comes a game misconduct, so he was tossed. But I'm not a lip reader, but it looked to me like he said, he bit me on the way off the floor. And he never came back. Posted a picture on Twitter of his hand, and he said he had gotten a tetanus shot, he had gotten some antibiotics, he'd gotten some stitches, and you see this, looks, in hindsight, it looks like a bite mark, but he's got this cut on his hand. And they don't give you tetanus shots just for getting a cut. So that seems odd. I'll be interested to see if there's any kind of extra discipline on that one. So that was something I don't think I've seen in a lacrosse game before. And the last thing I want to mention was some hopefully not as bad news as it looked. But I remember watching the game a couple of years ago when Andrew Suter blew his knee out when he played for the Minnesota Swarm, and he had to be carried off the field, and he missed the rest of that season. This was about the 4th or 5th game in, so he missed most of that season. And it looked like the same thing. I don't remember the exact play 2 years ago. But in this case, he was defending Kevin Crowley. Crowley kind of gave him a shove. Looked like an innocent play. Suter just dropped like a rock. Didn't get back up. And the trainers came out, and the players came out, and they literally carried him off the field because he couldn't put any weight on it. So I haven't heard anything since then about Suter or how he's doing. But I can't imagine a second injury that severe I don't know if it was the same knee. But if it was the same knee, I can't imagine that that's going to be good for his career. So hopefully it wasn't that bad, or hopefully it was the other knee or something that we will see Andrew Suter on an NLL floor before too much longer. Yeah, Melissa, did you see this game at all?
I did not see this one. Unfortunately, this was only on the NLL site. Although I'm curious, Brandon Miller faced 70 shots on goal, which is pretty crazy. Was New England just shooting at his chest, or was he just doing a phenomenal job? Or, I mean, it seems like they were just not taking very good shot selection.
There were a lot of shots that were just hitting him, and he didn't really have to move. One thing I did mention that he was pretty good in the first half. What I didn't mention was he was outstanding in the second half. He just did a great job in the second half, making save after save after save. Yeah, so it did seem that they were taking a lot of shots, and I guess that's kind of credit to the Rock defense in that they didn't have really good shots, so they shot whenever they could. But yeah, they did seem to just maybe their strategy was just pepper the guy with shots, and if we get enough shots, we'll get enough goals and we'll win. But yeah, Miller was just lights out in the second half. Tyler, how about you? Did you see this one?
No, I was out coaching my high school lacrosse players, but I was able to catch the next one. That bite thing seems weird. I'd be interested to should get back on that replay and see if it just punched the guy when his mouth was open or if he in fact bit him. I mean, you're throwing your fist towards a guy's mouth. Something like this is bound to happen.
That's certainly possible. Game number 2, Rochester 10, Colorado 11. I didn't see this one. This was the same night. I think I saw the very end of this one because it was still on when I got home from the Rock game. One record that was set, and I believe Melissa has some comments on this as well, is that John Grant passed Gary Gait on the all-time goals scored list. Grant is now second with 600 and I think he's up to 636 or 638 or something in that area. Gait had 635. And good news for John Grant, he only has 160-something to go to catch John Tavares, and that's assuming Tavares actually stops scoring goals. So yeah, another 160, another 3-4 seasons for Grant. Well, he's already 40. So that seems unlikely, but that's what we thought about Tavares too. Melissa, I assume you did see this one.
I did see this one. Unfortunately, since it was a Friday night game, I didn't get to see it live. This was the Blackout Cancer game, so it was all about the fundraising, which is always kind of cool because they actually pre-sell the jerseys to this one, and so then they put whoever you want on the back's name along with the player name. So it's actually kind of cool. Everyone has different color jerseys and stuff. But this one was the score is misleading. When you look at it, it looks like it was a really close game. It really wasn't. It was kind of close the first quarter. Second and third, it was all Mammoth. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the fourth quarter, like I think it was the last 8 minutes of the game, Rochester went and just scored goal after goal after goal after goal until they had 5 of them. 2 of them, I think, were on power plays. Yeah. No, 3 of them were on power plays, 1 full strength, and 1 extra attacker. So within a matter of minutes, they literally almost stole the game from the Mammoth. So it was definitely one of those. It was like the Mammoths game. Rochester was looking kind of off their game most of it. There was some serious cheap shotting from Rochester. There was just some dirty play in the first quarter. There was at one point, I think it was Smith? I think it was Smith, because Jones was kind of tearing into him afterwards. And one thing I've noticed watching Adam Jones play is it seems like it takes a lot to get under his skin. Like, he really isn't starting crap with everybody left and right, and it takes a lot for him to even just get into it with the other players. It seems like for the most part he just kind of lets it roll off his back and walks off. Like, he doesn't care. I mean, he got into it with Vince a little bit, and Vince was livid, and he just walked off. And that's what it seems like his thing. So he was really yelling at Smith. So I think it was Smith, but basically what happened is he just kind of swung the stick just really hard back and just slammed him with it. And Jones went down and play continued. And then there was a moment later, like Vitarelli got called for an elbow, and this was just in the span of a couple minutes. It was definitely some cheap shotting. It got cleaner towards the end of the game, but there was definitely some plays that there were some players that could have gotten hurt. It was a little disappointing to see. I can understand some bad blood from the week before, but there was definitely some shots that it was like, dude, seriously, be professional. And since I did watch this from home, it was kind of annoying with John Grant Jr. being so close to the record and then getting the record, because it seemed like Connor McGahey, like every time he mentioned that John Grant Jr. had the ball, it was he's really close to the record, and John Grant Jr. who broke Gary Gates' record, and John Grant Jr. who is now second on the all-time. It was like, okay, seriously, you've said this 9 times. We get it, stop. So that was kind of annoying. But otherwise, it was an interesting game in some ways. It was, like I said, mostly Colorado the first 2 quarters, and that fourth quarter was just, you just watched the game kind of dwindle away. So I think they may have gotten a little ahead of themselves, because they seemed like they were playing catch up to Rochester. Like they just kept being a couple steps behind, and defense just started falling apart, and offense couldn't seem to find the net. So it was, fourth quarter was a whole different game from the other ones. Did you see this one, Tyler?
Yeah, I was watching this game from a very keen angle of the stealth side, thinking, at halftime, it's like it's a close game, but the Mammoth had the lead, so Rochester has to exert extra energy and to get back in it. And then at the end of the fourth quarter, the Mammoth were, I think, up 5. It was 10-5 maybe. Maybe it was 11-5, and then I don't know if they scored again. But no, it was the other game on Friday when they didn't score in the fourth. But on Saturday. But I was like, dang it! Like if it was a 3-goal game, Rochester would just press and press, and they'd wear themselves out and come into this stealth game exhausted. And lo and behold, they didn't care that it was a 5-goal lead. They made all the effort they could to get back into it, and they didn't get there this time. Usually they do. That's I think it was a good little test for them as a team to get ready for the playoffs and know what they have to do against better teams. I really, really wish Rochester had got one more goal and gone to OT. They would have been just a smidge more tired, and that would have maybe made a difference on Saturday. It's all from the stealth angle, right? But it's not. Great game. John Grant Jr. getting the record was pretty cool. He was making some good shots that night, and I think that getting it at home played out a lot better, because you never know exactly when those goals will come. But he got it at home, and so the people got to be there to celebrate with him. It's probably pretty cool for him. That's my only thoughts about that game.
All right, moving on to the next one. Calgary, Minnesota. Calgary managed to hold off Minnesota 10-6, and I want to look at the scoring in this one. It was all Calgary in the first half. They took a 7-1 lead into halftime, and it was 13 minutes before the Swarm even scored their first one. Sean Evans, who had already set the new NLL scoring record the previous week, was already up to 5 points by the time we got to halftime, which is odd considering he ended up with 6 points. So he only had 1 goal, 1 point in the second half. But then Calgary only had 3 goals in the second half. So it looked like a bit more of a defensive battle in the second than in the first, especially from the Minnesota point of view. So I saw the first half of this. It just looked like it was going to be all Calgary the whole game. And then once they got to halftime, I actually switched over to the Colorado-Edmonton game, so I didn't see the second half of this one. Melissa, you had some comments on this one too.
Yeah, this one, like you said, it looked like this was going to be all Calgary. They just seemed like every shot they took, it just looked easy. It just didn't look like there was anything that was going to block them. There was some odd calls. There was definitely one I remember, and the flag was thrown on it, where it was surprised to see the ref even call it, because from at least the TV angle, it looked like I think it was Dixon had like 2 clear steps in the crease before he even shot the ball. So it was weird to see him raise his hands. We ended up being waved off, but that was kind of the way the officiating was that night. There were some really great calls, and then some that you just scratched your head on. I really felt like Minnesota looked like the team that they were. They looked like a young team without a lot of experience or leadership, playing a team that is starting to play well. And so it didn't seem like Minnie really got back into the game, and that's what made the fourth quarter close. Or it just seemed like Calgary had backed off and was like, yeah, we got this in the bag. And so the fourth quarter, they were just, oh, wait, we actually got to stop these guys. But even still, they won pretty solidly by 4 goals, so it's not like it ever was really that close. But there was that potential. About midway through the quarter, Minnesota had gone on a 3, if you include the third quarter, they were on a 4-goal run. So before Calgary scored again. So it got a little bit closer, but it was more like they're like, okay, we need to put this away. But it wasn't like that Minnesota has just started playing really great. It just seemed like Calgary was like, yeah, we got this, whatever. And they were just already thinking ahead. But I hope Minnesota can, come together, because you can see some sparks of talent. You can see some building blocks that they can really build on next season. So it'll be interesting to see what next season's like, because this year it just seems like the team's kind of been dismantled again. And so they're really lacking that direction that they really need right now. And so I think if they get a good leader on the team and, maybe a couple experienced veterans, they might actually be a better team next year. But they keep having so much upheaval. They looked kind of lost. Did you see this one, Tyler?
Yeah, I was able to catch part of it. It's super hard to be the team that's been eliminated from the playoffs. Like, what can they get up for? What's their motivation? And on the other end, Calgary is not in, but absolutely fighting for their playoff lives. So they had tons of motivation, and that drove the result we're seeing. Minnesota definitely has to look towards next year and finding a leader amongst who they currently have. And I don't know, they picked up a captain in Joel White from New England. Maybe he'll take over that role, or maybe they'll stick with somebody who's more established like Callum Crawford. I don't know. Calgary's looking very good right now. We got 2 weeks left, including a final game between them and the Stealth to figure out that last playoff spot. But right now they got a half-game lead. And so as bad as the 0-6 start was, right now it doesn't matter. They're playing good enough ball to, I think, make Colorado worry if they're the team that gets in.
I wanted to say one more thing about the broadcast of the Calgary-Minnesota game. Kudos to the Swarm management. I'm assuming they were the ones that set this up. But Kyle Matisse, who's been injured for a couple of weeks, showed up on the broadcast in the first, I guess it was the first 10 minutes. I don't think it was all of the first quarter, which is part of it, but maybe the first 10 minutes or so of the game, providing some commentary, and they were asking him questions, and I thought that was really interesting. Getting it's not even that he's an experienced veteran. I mean, he's been around for a couple of years. So it's not like he's been around for 5 or 10 years, or that they had, Callum Crawford or somebody on there. Matisse is a really young guy, but he seemed like a natural. He seemed like he really knew what he was talking about. He seemed comfortable. I was going to say on camera, you didn't see him, but you heard him. I thought he did a pretty good job. So kudos to the Swarm for making that happen. And oh crap, there was one other thing I wanted to mention, and I can't remember what it was. Okay, if I remember, I'll come back to it. But until then, we will move on. Edmonton, Colorado. I saw parts of this one as well. I think I saw the first half of like every game somehow. but I missed the second half, so I didn't see what the interesting ending to this one, which kind of sounded like the interesting ending to the other Colorado game, where Edmonton was up. At one point, it was 12-5, and then Colorado scored, and then Edmonton scored again, 13-6, going into the fourth quarter, and then Colorado scored 6 straight goals to make it 13-12, and just couldn't get that last one. So, I imagine, Melissa, that you saw this one. It kind of sounds the same in that the score makes it sound like it was a close game, and for the most part, it wasn't. But at the very end, it was.
I did not see this one. This one was only on NL Live as well, but it was one that we were kind of watching on Point Streak, and it is, like you said, it looked like it was a close game, but it was totally a fourth quarter comeback, and it really seemed like Edmonton was just dominating, and then they just kind of backed off. So it was definitely surprising to see that they came within 1 goal, because it seemed like they were just kind of getting their butts handed to them. It definitely seemed like Jones had a night. He had what was it, 7 goals? Let's see. Yeah, Jones had 7 goals, 1 assist. He went 7 for 9 on his shots on goal. John Grant Jr. went 0-3 with 3 assists. So compared that to the night before, where, let's see, John Grant Jr. went 3 for 12 with 2 assists, and Jones went 4 for 13. So Jones really had just a hot hand. I mean, he had a crazy high shot percentage. So obviously it was great for him, but the rest of the team just wasn't quite there. Drew Westervelt only had 1 goal, I think.
1 and 3, yeah.
So yeah, he's been really quiet, and I don't know if that's because the coaching staff has moved him into a different role. I know some of my fellow Mammoth fans have been commenting on, okay, what happened to Westervelt? It seemed like he was really scoring in the beginning, and now he's not doing much. So it maybe he's just moved into a different role. I don't know. But he seems really quiet, and that could be having a big impact right now. But it's one I would be really curious to watch, at least the fourth quarter, to see what happened. Did Edmonton just kind of do, like we were discussing with some of the other games, that they thought they had it in the bag, and so they just kind of was like, yeah, whatever, we got this, and Colorado came back into it? Or was it just Colorado started finally finding their shots? I mean, maybe they were hitting Bold's chest all night. I've definitely seen them have those nights where it's like, really, would you aim for something other than his chest? So it'd be really interesting to see what happened in this game, because it definitely went from being a blowout to really kind of a nail-biter. So it'll be interesting when they play here May 2nd. Do you see this one, Tyler?
Saw a little bit of the start. Then the stealth game came on. I should have watched the second half of this game instead of the stealth game. I was following along, and after the third quarter, I stopped paying attention, and that's when it really got interesting. I went back and tried to watch that fourth quarter this afternoon, but it wasn't posted yet. I'd say the Rush got lucky. I always want to say you can't let up. You can't give any team a chance, and they did let up. And the result was they barely won a game that they had in hand. So they need to go harder and not let up at any point. This is potentially a preview of the playoff series they're going to have. And they came out strong, but in that fourth quarter, it left the Mammoth thinking. I mean, I can't say what they're thinking, but in my opinion, if I was a Mammoth player, I'd be thinking, okay, we can't start slow, and we can take these guys in this situation, so we'll be okay. That's all I got on this one. It'd be, I don't know, great comeback, kind of mirror image of their, but reversed of what they had the night before when they had their lead, and Knighthawks came clawing back. But any night, these games are not finished until they're done, unless you're playing the Stealth, who don't have fourth quarter comebacks.
Well, but I mean, like what you were saying, that they just didn't seem to finish. I mean, Edmonton had 7 goals in the third to Colorado's 6 in the fourth. I mean, we're always talking this is a game of runs, and you really can't count any team out, and yet it seems like teams are kind of doing that. Maybe since we're going into the playoffs, some of the teams aren't caring as much. I don't know. How far do you push it that you might injure yourself when you really do have to start thinking of the playoffs because you've already secured that spot? I mean, Calgary is one of the few teams that's still fighting for one. Colorado and Edmonton have had it for a couple weeks. So, but when you look at how disproportionate the goal scoring is in the second half to the first half, this was almost like two different games.
Definitely.
And our last game of the week, Rochester and Vancouver. I managed to watch this one, and it's been a few weeks since I complained about the NLL Live program, whatever you want to call it. For the most part, I think it's been all right this year. They certainly had some hiccups in the first couple of weeks, and I think there were people who actually paid for games that they couldn't watch at all, or they paid for the whole package and there were games that they couldn't watch. And I've run into problems in, I would say, more than half of the games where my feed will just lock up completely, and I've got this down to a science now. I know how to get out of the full screen view, log off, log back on, get my password in there, get back to the game, and I only lose 30, 45 seconds of the game. The problem is when you have to do that every 30 or 45 seconds. And I watched the first half of the Calgary game, I think, was on Universal. The Colorado Edmonton game, I watched the first half, and I think I had to do that twice. Then I watched the first part of the Rochester Vancouver game, and I had to do that every 2 minutes or something. And it got to the point where near the end of the first quarter, I was thinking, okay, I can't watch this game because I can't keep doing this and watching 30 seconds of action and then having it lock up again, because this is just a total waste of time. So all this time I've been assuming it's because I have to have my VPN up and running because the service isn't available in Canada, so I have to fool it into thinking that I'm in the US. And so I have to have my VPN running, so my VPN is causing this problem. But when I can watch half of one game and have almost no problems and barely get anything watched in another game, it's not my problem, I don't think. So what I think is they have some hugely crazy artificial intelligence program in there, because as soon as I tweet that this is happening, the problem goes away. So I just sort of tweeted earlier and it would have been fine. Because literally, like 5 minutes after I tweeted it, I logged in, I watched it, and then I watched 3/4 of the rest of the game and didn't have to do this again. So I don't know what's going on there, but hopefully they get that cleaned up for next season. Anyway, on to the game. Enough of my little rant. I've said a couple times this season that it looks like there's two different Vancouver teams, and you can flip a coin to see which one shows up, whether it's the really good one or the not so good one. And we've certainly seen more of the not so good one this season. But it looked to me like the good one showed up on this night. But unfortunately, the really good Rochester defense and Matt Vince also showed up. So as good as the Vancouver offense was, they still couldn't solve the Rochester D. Vince was amazing. The defense was good. Like I said, I thought the stealth offense did a pretty decent job. They were passing all over the place. They were getting some looks, but not a lot. But yeah, it did seem more like the Rochester defense was really good than the stealth offense was bad. And it does seem to be funny how often a player who's playing against a team that recently traded him or released him or whatever, they played just so much better. Joel McCready against his former team had 5 goals and an assist, and just looked like he could do no wrong out there, kind of like Brett Hickey a week or two ago. And I imagine Tyler wants to get this game out of the way, so I'll let him talk about it quickly.
Yeah, this was a rough one. I mean, the Stealth were in it and battling, but never controlled any aspect of it outside of face-offs. And I think loose balls, but I think that was skewed by face-offs. I don't know, Matt Vince was playing as he does, and nobody on the Stealth seemed to crack it but McCready. And nobody on the Stealth, aside from McCready, was driving to the cage to create his opportunities. Everybody else was just taking shots from the outside. And I think it's basically a proven fact by this point that that does not work against Vince. You have to get in close. So if the team offense can't do movement to get a close in look or can't drive to get a close in look, they never had a chance in this game. I think I picked them to win in the pick'em. It was optimistic and homer pick, and they need to win to hold on to their lead in the playoff spot that they had. But they couldn't beat a team that played the night before and then traveled, and that was a total bummer. They got outworked pretty much every spot they could, and I don't even have a fix to suggest other than drive the cage. Roy Smith was out for his second game of his two-game suspension. It'll be nice to have him back for the last 2 games to push and try and get their spot. They're not out of the playoffs. They're a half game behind, but they've played 1 less game, so they could still get a win this weekend in Buffalo and be tied in the standings with the Roughnecks and come down to that last game against the Roughnecks. But it's looking very, very rough for this stealth team to make the playoffs after having a gift handed to them with that Roughnecks 0-6 start. I think it was awesome seeing Mitch McMichael taking draws. Speaking of faceoffs, Bobby Snyder didn't play either game for Mammoth this weekend, and I didn't hear anything about that. But on the stealth side, that was the only bright spot, and that's not a great bright spot to have. That's a bright spot you mention when you're just fishing for any reason to have had a good experience. They got 2 games left, and they have a chance to win those games, but it's not a sure thing, and it'll make for an exciting finish to the regular season, but that might just be it. Regular season and done again for the Stealth. Did you catch any of this, Melissa, or any thoughts on it?
I did not catch this one. I was definitely curious to watch it because, like Graham said, Vancouver's been so hit or miss, and we know they have the talent. So it really is something else because we know this is a talented team. Any of these players, most of the league would be happy to have on their team. So it's got to be something else. I don't know. Not having Chris Hall on the bench, if that's kind of lingering or what. I know as a Mammoth fan, I would prefer that we play Vancouver on May 9th, but it's kind of looking like it's going to be Calgary, and Calgary has had the Mammoth's number in the playoffs pretty much every year. So, yeah, I want Vancouver to win. I think we extend more of a chance. Because you never know which Vancouver's team's going to come out, so I'm not saying it would be an easy win or anything like that. But with Vancouver, I see the Mammoth, having a chance of winning that. With Calgary, you can't underestimate them, and for some reason, even the years they've had a bad season, they just seem to have the Mammoth's number. So I'd rather see Vancouver in the playoffs. But yeah, unfortunately I didn't get to watch this one.
One weird thing about this game that I noticed was Paul Dawson scored a goal, which is not completely rare, but I don't think he does it all that often. He's got 3 this year. But Dan Dawson got into a fight, which seemed backwards for those two. And I looked it up, and it's Dan Dawson's first fighting major since 2010. Whereas I'm pretty sure Dawson has more than that. In fact, he's only got 1 this year. But Paul is definitely the fighter, and Dan is not. But being really strong and 6'6", I wouldn't want to go in the ring with him. The one thing I was going to mention about the Minnesota game that I'd forgotten about was not only do they have a whole bunch of young players that they've gotten in the last couple of drafts, but I think they have 3 or 4 picks in the first round in next season's draft, which just that's par for the course for Minnesota. They have a ton of draft picks, and so what they're going to do is pick a bunch of people, put them in the lineup, and now they have 3 more people that they have to deal with as rookies. Now that's, I think, less of an issue in the NLL than in something like the NHL when you've got rookies coming up from AAA or from their farm teams. AAA, I know is a baseball term, but you know what I mean. Whereas a lot of the NLL rookies have actually played against these people for the last however many years in the WLA or in MSL or whatever. Um, but in any case, they're going to be shuffling around their lineup again to get these more rookies in. Um, and I'm wondering if that turnover every year is not helping the Swarm in that if you look at their, it was almost like what we saw with the Philadelphia Wings over a few years was half of their team was different from the previous year. And when you look at a team like the Rock or the Knighthawks, who have sort of a central core, and they change, a few players here and there, but for the most part, the team that they're playing this year and the team that they had last year is mostly the same. But when you're taking out 10 and 12 guys and putting in 10 and 12 new guys, it's going to take some time to get those new guys accustomed to your system, if you've even got a system. And so I'm wondering if the fact that the Swarm have had all these draft picks coming in every year is actually working not to their benefit, but to their detriment. And unless they realize, okay, it's going to take 4 or 5 years, but eventually we're going to be a really, really good team. Maybe if they don't keep trading these players away. Anyway, that's my Minnesota rant for today, and I'm wearing my Minnesota Swarm jersey today, so I get to rant about them today. Moving on to last week's predictions. We all went 4-1.
No, we didn't.
We did not. Did I miss one?
I had perfect.
Nicely
I did not
done.
go 4-1.
I somehow got that wrong. Let me take a look at one I had. You didn't. My mistake. Yes, you got Rochester right. For some reason, I thought you had Vancouver there, but no, I just highlighted the wrong thing. Yes, so Melissa, like I was just saying, was 5-0 last week. Nicely done. Tyler and I were 4-1. So that brings us overall. Melissa is in the lead with 45 and 27, almost 20 games above 500. Not bad. I'm second at 42 and 30, and Tyler is at 40 and 32. So all three of us are having pretty decent seasons, especially considering the start. I think, yeah, the first 2 weeks, I was 1 for 9. Tyler was 2 for 9. Melissa, you were 4 for 9, so not bad. But yeah, we had a rough start, but just like the Calgary Roughnecks, we're coming through at the end here. Sorry, Tyler. Next week's games. 4 games next week. We're almost have the same picks among the 4 of us. I'll go over mine and then I'll let you guys go. Vancouver Buffalo. I'm going to go with Buffalo with this one. They've had a week off, and I wasn't sure about this one. I don't see this being a Buffalo blowout because, like you said, Vancouver is playing for their lives, their playoff lives here. But at the same time, this game almost doesn't matter from a standings point of view for the Stealth, because whether they win or lose this game, they still have to beat Calgary in the last game in order to make the playoffs. So even if they lose to Buffalo, as long as they beat Calgary, they're in. And if they win against Buffalo, they still have to beat Calgary to get in. So this one doesn't really matter much. But if they lose it, then it could certainly damage their confidence or have that sort of effect. But I'm still going to go for Buffalo on this one. With their week off, I think they'll be well rested and ready. And I think they probably want to close things out on their own terms. They need to either win a game or have New England lose to get in the playoffs. And I'm pretty sure they'll want to go in with a win. They don't want to back into the playoffs. So I'm going with the Bandits there. New England and Rochester. I'm going to go with Rochester on this one. They looked pretty darn good last week. We all know what they're capable of. Now that said, I have a feeling New England will win one of these 2 games this weekend, whether it's against Rochester or Buffalo. I picked against them in both cases anyway. I went with Rochester and I went with Buffalo in their game. But it wouldn't surprise me too much if New England were to come back and win one of those 2 games. Edmonton, Minnesota. That's not much of a challenge there. I think I'm going to go with Edmonton. Minnesota wants to play spoiler. I get that. Edmonton isn't really playing for anything anymore. I guess they'd like um, the first overall seed, and they have to win out and have the Rock lose to do that. But I don't see them losing to Minnesota at this point, particularly when Minnesota is without Callum Crawford, who's gone for the season, without Cal Matisse, who's gone for the season. They lost somebody else last week who I don't even remember. But yeah,
McIntosh, I think.
that's right. So they're last place. They're out of the playoffs. They're crippled. They're missing people. I don't see them winning this game. I'm going with Edmonton. And then, like I said, Buffalo over New England in the last one. Tyler, what do you think?
So first game for the Stealth at the Bandits. Thankfully, the Bandits are the closest thing to the Stealth in the sense of you don't know what you're going to get, so that gives the Stealth a chance to win this game. But I'm not giving it to them. It all comes down to that final week, so I'm going to go with the Buffalo to win this game because they should. They've been the better team throughout the season, but they might blow it this night. But I don't think so. New England at Rochester. I think Rochester's on a good groove right now. Ever since they lost to the Mammoth, but ever since the 2-goal outing, they've been 3-goal outing, they've been dramatically improved. And I can see them beating New England, even though New England is playing for their playoff lives and have a lot of reasons to come out and win that game. It's hard to beat Matt Vince in that defense. Edmonton at Minnesota. I hope Minnesota doesn't set a record by scoring 1 goal going against this Edmonton team. It's nutso. They are going to be completely mismatched in this game. And I think Edmonton will win it, and hopefully they don't have another one of those we've got this in the bag and for some reason Minnesota gets back in it and blows my pick, but everything says Edmonton takes this game. Finally, Buffalo at New England. I'm throwing in New England here because I got to make up ground. I think Buffalo's the clear favorite, but I could see New England winning this game in certain situations. So I'm going to go ahead and pick it and say New England will sneak in a win here and get me 1 game closer to tying you, Graham. How's your picks looking, Melissa?
Mine are actually the same as Graham's, so he and I aren't going to probably change too much. With Vancouver and Buffalo, like you said, Buffalo can be very hit or miss, but Vancouver it's like they're lacking a fire right now. And I would love to see them, find it and be passionate and, kind of go hit these last few games strong. Whatever's lacking right now, I just don't know what they need to fix, but something's off. So until they get that figured out, I'm probably going to be picking them to lose. With New England and Rochester, I think Rochester, unless they go in and really just underestimate New England and just don't play their hardest, I just don't see New England taking it. Same with Edmonton and Minnesota. Minnesota's just so young, and they're missing some key players. Like I said earlier, that they have those building blocks, but they're not that team right now. And so I think they should just use this as a learning experience and see what they can move forward with for next season. And Buffalo and New England, since both teams play other opponents the night before, it could definitely be interesting. But I think Buffalo's they're going to probably be the stronger team. New England hasn't given us very much this second half of the season to show us otherwise, so I'll probably keep picking against them as well. Which is a shame, because watching Evan Kirk those first couple games and the way the team was playing, I was really excited to see what they were going to do this season, and I am almost as disappointed in them as I am some other things with this season. But
Okay. One thing I wanted to correct from what I said just a minute ago. Callum Crawford is out for the season. Cal Matisse is not, or at least not necessarily. He did specifically say on the broadcast that he's hoping to be better next week and be able to play in the last couple of Swarm games. So he's not necessarily out for the season. So that's kind of good news for Minnesota, though I don't think that changes my pick. Yeah, so that's it for the show. AddictedToLacrosse.com is where you want to go for our old episodes from this season and last. If you want to get a hold of us during the week before our next show, Twitter is probably the best way. Lax Podcast at Twitter. I mentioned in the past we have an email address, feedback@addictedtolacrosse.com, and that is still true. We've been getting an awful lot of spam at that account for the last couple of weeks. So, like I said, Twitter is probably the best way, just so that your email doesn't get lost in the spam folder. Or Facebook as well, facebook.com/laxpodcast. You can reach us at any of those places. This has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.